There are 168 hours in a week. We go to church for 1 hour. What about the other 167?
Cue this podcast. We're here to bring the church to you the rest of the week. I'm David Vogel, the Director of Communication here at Central Community Church.
I'm Corey Brodel, the Director of Community. We've been to the 1 hour in church. Now welcome to the other 167.
Well, we are here today with Justin Mohr, who is our Executive Director here at Central, which means he's big boss man.
So we better watch what we say.
Exactly.
You guys better be very nice to me.
We're going to do our best.
Be very nice.
Your hair looks very nice today, Justin.
Thank you. It's graying quickly.
Probably because of this podcast. We're sorry.
Okay, so our topic is being a believer versus being a follower. And you're pretty passionate about this, and because you've got a pretty cool personal story with it. So we're going to start there and just tell us your story.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, when I think about the believer versus follower, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more, what that means. But for me, I think I just look at my own personal life, and I grew up in the church, and I'm thankful for that. Every Sunday we went to church. I knew who God was. I've always had that believing side. But for me, for a long time, I don't know that I was all in. And that's where kind of the following really comes into place for me. Because I think it's easy for us to sit out there and hear what the preacher says and to read the Bible and go, I believe it, I believe it. But as it really came in and changed us to the point that now we're following, we're all in. And so that's more so kind of what my story looked like. We're growing up in church, but then getting to that point going, okay, at some point, God wants to do something with all of us, and we have to make that decision to kind of go all in and start following.
Now, I've heard it said, some say that you get it here, you get it in your head, but then it switches over and you then get it in your heart. Is that what you're talking about, where you've accepted Christ, now you know it in your heart, but now you're living it? Is there a difference
I think that's definitely part of it. And I think it's different for everybody, right? Everyone interprets things a little bit different, whether they are more with their head, more with their heart, more with their gut. I mean, all of those things play a part in that. For me, though, yes, I would say it was very much in my head. And so I had kind of figured out the religion side. I was missing the heart piece, which was more the relationship side.
Yeah.
Got it.
So I was carrying out, my faith. I was doing certain things, but it wasn't necessarily coming from here as much as it was coming from here, kind of like what you said.
Because you knew you should be doing it, not because your heart was in it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good way to describe it. And so over time, the heart starts to change, and that's probably the biggest piece of the story is the heart change, not the change of the actions. But yeah, it had to go from the head and finally got down to the heart.
Yeah.
So give us some examples of what that looks like.
Yeah. Well, for me, when I think about it, I would describe it this way. I think I had built up kind of a wall around my heart. And now I know for us guys, as soon as I say heart, I maybe lost a few people and we start thinking, we're going to talk about emotions. You guys know me well enough to know that's not what we're talking about, or else I wouldn't be a part of this podcast
Right, we
today.
didn't even bring the tissue box.
Nope, we didn't. When I talk about heart, I talk more so, when the psalmist cries out, search my heart. It's searching that innermost being, right? You at the depths of your soul. And so for me, I think I had built up a lot of walls. And what I mean by that is being more of a guarded person. I kept a lot of people at a distance, but then that really translated into probably me keeping God at a distance as well. Going, hey, I want you a part of this, or I want to let you in here, or let you in there, but I'm not going to let you in all the way to my heart. And so it really took a period of time where I had to knock down that wall. God knocked down that wall, right, through certain things, but removing that wall so God could finally get into my heart, see my heart, and I was okay letting him in there. And that's really when the change started happening. And so I think that it's kind of twofold a little bit, or kind of the chicken or the egg, right? Does the heart change, and then does it lead to the behaviors and actions, or can you step out and the behaviors then lead to the heart change? And what I would say is I think it can be both. Yeah. I think it's just about the attitude and the posture you're taking with God of, am I willing to let God in, to see my heart, to search my heart, to change me in my innermost being. Sometimes that might be stepping out, and our actions then, God uses that to change our heart through that process. Or it might be, in some of the cases I had, where God changed my heart before I was ever able to step out and fully follow.
Yeah. this might put you on the spot, but do you have some specific examples of that in your life?
Well, I think just even getting involved with church. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for some of that heart change and taking down the wall and letting God in. You know, I've sat in these same pews and got involved and were part of the church, but it took God getting to my heart to really step out and volunteer and to get engaged and get to that place where it was like, okay, God, you get everything of me. If you want me to serve in this place, if you want me to do this or that, okay, I'm yours. I'll do whatever you need me to do. And I think about that belief standpoint a little bit, where it's easy for us to sit there and say, we believe that God wants to be at the center of our marriage, or we believe that God wants to be in the center of our work, right? It's another thing, though, the following comes in when we actually let that happen. And God changes us to a place where now he is at the center of our marriage. And it's not just a belief anymore. We're following him, or our work, or our volunteer, whatever it is. I mean, the possibilities are endless, but I think it's more so once God changes your heart in that, now you're able to step out and follow. And I don't want to downplay the idea of belief, okay? So that's not what I'm saying here, because we know that through believing, right, our faith is how we're saved. Yeah. So I'm not downplaying that at all. I'm just saying that other component, that when we follow, it really is a sign of our faith, right, coming out in the beliefs that we have. It's showing that attitude behind it, what we really believe.
So people talk about transformed lives, and I feel like what you're talking about is part of that. So how is your life different now once you make that once you put those guardrails down, or those
take down the wall, right?
The wall. Once you take the wall down, how does that change? What's your life like now?
I think it's just amazing in so many ways. It's even tough to describe, but it's just that relationship. Like, we go back, instead of it being the religion, it's the relationship. And a relationship is all the time, everywhere, right? And so God just being at the center of that and following, like I said, one of it's just sitting here today. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But that whole idea of following, you know, in my own life, I've just seen how it's impacted so many other people. And that's one thing that I would share is, you know, I think about the believing and how believing really impacts your eternity, but following impacts everyone else's. Yeah. And so what I mean by that is, when I believe and I have that saving faith, it changes my life. It really does, right? And we know that that's what happens. But when I take that extra step and I take down the walls of my heart and God changes me, and it's that fully transformed life, now you can't help but follow. Yeah. Can't help but follow God. Follow him in your marriage, follow him in your workplace, follow him in your serving or the school, wherever it is. And when you're following him, and now you're where he wants you to be, and you're willing to be used, now you're impacting everyone else's salvation, right? Yeah. You're impacting everyone else's eternity. And that's where the difference really comes from. And that's where I've seen it in my own life, is the impact that I've been able to have. And it's not about me, but God working through me, because being willing to go all in.
Yeah. So for the people that are listening, you always, for those that don't know, Justin being our boss, you love challenging us to think of it. Yes, you just shook his head no. He loves to challenge us.
I'm not arguing with him because he's in charge.
So do you have just that step that people can make, or that little challenge that they can think of after this podcast?
Yeah, you know, I think I'd just reflect on a couple questions. And the first one would be, am I all in? Am I all in? And I think that's a great question to ask. And then I would encourage you to ask it to yourself again. So if you answered that question and you said yes the first time, ask yourself one more time and say, really? And I don't mean that to discourage you or say that it's not true, but I found that we're really good at telling ourselves what we want to hear. Yeah. I know in my own life, I could ask myself a question like that, and I want to be all in. That's the answer I want to have. So it's really easy for me to respond that first time. That way I go, yeah, I am. But I think if we stop and ask ourselves, okay, really, am I? Maybe I'll find some areas in there where I go, you know, I am all in. I want to be all in, but man, I haven't let God into my marriage or my work, or there's some areas of my life that, man, I'm not quite all in. And so then you can spend that time with God, right?
Yep.
And figuring out, okay, God, get in my heart and search my heart. And that would be the other thing, is just spending time asking God, search my heart. The psalmist said it, search my heart. And I think we can do the same things, going, God, search my heart. Show me, what I need to give to you. Where do I need to surrender? Where do I need to become more of yours so you can use me however you want to? And I think we can ask ourselves some of those questions and then just be honest with the answer. And I'll be honest, it's kind of hard sometimes because you have to be a little vulnerable, and that's not my specialty.
You kind of have to be still too, because you have to actually sit in that. You can't be running to the next thing and actually really ponder those questions and kind of take inventory. And that's my challenge. Is the busyness is probably my wall.
It's a great point. Great point. We all have walls, and they all probably look differently, right? Depending on who we are. But that's a great point. And so I think if we can really ask ourselves those questions about, are we all in? And if we are, great. If we're not, if that happens to be the answer, where are those areas that we're not all in, and how do we get to that place? What do we need God to do in our hearts to change us so he gets that place too?
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really good podcast. I think it's good for all of us. Even if we say I'm a follower of Christ and I know it, there's still those places, those areas that we just hold on to. And
are you following because you're walking behind him, or because he's got your hand and he's dragging you down the path?
Yeah, both. Yes. Yes.
Well, and something else I would say is we just have to remember too, every day we have to make this decision.
Yes. Yeah.
It's not a once in a lifetime, like, hey, God, I invite you into my business or my marriage or those places. It is every day. We have to ask ourselves that question when we wake up. Am I going to follow today?
Yeah.
God, are you going to be a part of that? Because I've invited you in and you've done something in my heart that I want you in the middle of that. And so if you're sitting there and you're going, man, I wish I had been better about it, great news. You can decide now. Tomorrow you're going to have to ask yourself that question, the next day and the next day. And it's just ongoing, that every day we've got to ask ourselves those questions and make that decision.
Wow.
Always so good at making us think. I love that.
Yep.
So,
Well, hopefully something in that was helpful for you guys or someone that was listening
I think it
today,
was.
wherever they are.
well, thanks for being here,
Yes,
Justin.
thanks, Justin.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for listening to 167. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you're listening from.
And to keep up with everything at Central Community Church, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to watch us record this podcast live, find us on YouTube.
We think the 167 hours between church services are so important, and we hope you'll share this episode with your friends. Join us next week.